This episode of Photo Day takes a look at Kevin Carter's photograph of the vulture and the small child. As the controversy around the photograph has grown, so have the myths around both Kevin and the circumstances under which the photograph was taken. The photograph itself has a very simple composition showing a starving child and behind that a vulture looking on. The image was taken in 1993 in South Sudan. At the time, the country was experiencing a severe famine, and Kevin and Joao Silva were given the opportunity to photograph for the UN. The vultures were actually feeding on a pile of rubbish, and the weak child was en route to a feeding station. Initially, it was thought that the child was a girl, but it turned out to be a boy who actually made it to the feeding station, but a few years later died of fever. The photographers had been told that they should not interact at all with the famine victims for fear of spreading disease, and this was just a short stop within a press junket, and they had to return to their aeroplane as soon as possible. If you search on the internet, you'll see that this photograph has received a lot of attention, and the posts seem to be generally of two different types. They seem to be evenly split between armchair critics and goth types that seem to be attracted to the darkness that led to Ken's suicide. As with a lot of stuff on the internet, the context seems to get lost and simple analysis seems to dominate. What also added to the mystique about this photograph was that Richie Edwards from Manic Street Preachers wrote a song called Kevin Carter and subsequently staged his own disappearance. And a heavy metal rock band called Sabotage based a whole album, Poets and Madmen, on Kevin. There's obviously no simple, definitive answer to all the complex questions around this photograph, but I think a little more context will shift Kevin from being either a villain or a nihilistic idol. At that time, South Africa was caught up in an ongoing cycle of violence, and we as photographers were caught up with it. There was no real opportunity for us to step back and assess the bigger picture or to look at how we were dealing with the situation. It was more a case of us reacting to whatever happened on any particular day, and this carried on for years. In a situation like this where one is constantly under high stress, one loses a firm grip on what is reality and life starts to take on the form of a movie. At that stage, it becomes difficult not to slip into becoming the main character and then seeing everything around you as a film set and all the other people within it being mere support characters. So for Kevin and Joao Silva at that stage, getting an assignment to go to South Sudan with the UN would pretty much have been just a filler within this ongoing cycle of violence. There would have been no time to think through the ethics of photographing famine victims or for evaluating their role as photographers in this environment. Probably their biggest concern at the time would have been, are they going to be absent during some major event within the South African story? By this stage, all of us photographers had been exposed for years to excessive violence, misery, death, and destruction. And at the time of seeing Kevin's photograph and hearing the controversy around it, we were all challenged to assess how we would have reacted in the same situation. At the time, we all jokingly referred to the picture as Kevin's budgie picture. It's impossible to know whether any of us would have taken the same picture as Kevin, and whether we would have had the presence of mind to act in a different manner. We were all self-medicating to keep ourselves on some kind of even keel, and probably Kevin was self-medicating a little more than others. Kevin was quite a gentle soul, and I remember he had a Sunday music show on a radio station called 702. I think this line of work suited Kevin far better than hardcore news. Looking back onto that time, I think Joao Silva was probably the only natural-born war photographer amongst us. After the photograph got published in the New York Times, the pressure on Kevin started to increase, and winning the Pulitzer probably pushed him over the edge. He was visibly losing the plot, And when he was unable to deliver on a number of assignments, he became really insecure and fell into depression. 3 months before Kevin took his own life, there was a major event that would have rocked anyone. His close friend and colleague, Ken Oosterbroek, was shot and killed in an incident in a township called Tokoza, just outside of Johannesburg. All of these blows sent Kevin into a deep depression from which he never recovered. Kevin died in his red Nissan pickup truck on the 27th of July 1994.